Hello and welcome back to Jo's Art History Podcast Bitesize, small, manageable podcast episodes that see me, Jo McLaughlin, your host and resident art historian, deep dive into a specific artwork or artist in 10 minutes or less. This week, we're going to take a deep dive into one of contemporary art's most fascinating people, Yayoi Kusama. Now, in this episode, we're not looking at a particular artwork, but rather we're going to be examining the artist's fascination with pumpkins. This is a motif, much like the polka dot, that has completely dominated Kusama's artistic practice, and it's something that has lots of different meanings and symbolism. Art historians and contemporary historians alike have debated its meanings and her love of them, and I thought this could be a really fun episode to do as a bite size. Let's get started. For those of you that may not know, Yayoi Kusama is a Japanese artist celebrated for her distinctive style and thematic consistency, which has made a significant impact on contemporary art. Her work spans various mediums. This includes paintings, sculpture, installation and performance art, and often features repeat patterns, vivid colours and organic forms. Among the many motifs that reoccur throughout Kusama's career and her artistic practice, the pumpkin stands out as a particularly intriguing and persistent symbol. Born in Japan in 1929, Kusama from a young age experienced hallucinations that manifested as various dots and patterns that covered everything around her. These experiences profoundly influenced her artistic vision, leading her to incorporate repetitive patterns and vivid, otherworldly colours into her work. Kusama's early life in rural Japan also exposed her to the natural world, and here is where she encountered for the first time the humble pumpkin. Now, Kusama herself has even recounted how pumpkins were a source of comfort and stability during her traumatic childhood. And in an interview with The Telegraph in 2015, she describes a formative experience in her youth that, and I quote, "I was enchanted by their charming and winsome form, and I have always found them a source of solace." And it's this personal connection from her childhood that really has laid the groundwork for the pumpkin becoming this reoccurring motive within her work. Now, I think culturally it's very important here to look at the significance of the pumpkin in Japan. And culturally, the pumpkin in Japan is often associated with rural life and traditional Japanese cuisine. Known as kabocha, the Japanese pumpkin is a staple in many households and symbolises substance and nourishment. This cultural context provides a really interesting backdrop for understanding Kusama's use of the pumpkin, particularly when you think about her personal experiences and what she goes through as a young age. This idea that this item in her country symbolises stability, nourishment, substance. And when thinking about what she went through, particularly in terms of the hallucination, which have completely plagued the artist her entire life, it seems to start to join the dots a little bit as to why she really has clung to the humble pumpkin as something that is grounding and nourishing to her in terms of her practice. In Japanese folklore, the pumpkin is also associated with good luck and prosperity. And this symbolism can be seen in Kusama's work, where the pumpkins that she uses often appear in bright golden forms, and they just seem to radiate this positive energy. There's something about these pumpkins that are very inviting, they're very tactile, and they're very comforting. And the repetition of the pumpkin motif in her art can be interpreted as her trying to bring forth these positive attributes across the world and spreading a sense of love and abundance throughout her practice. Now, as an artistic symbol, Kusama's pumpkins are not merely representations of the vegetable, but she also transforms them into larger-than-life sculptures and installations and invites viewers into her unique world. These pumpkins dance and move, they shrink in size, they blow up in size. They're just the most incredible, playful creations. And when you think about even something that happened very recently, like last year when Louis Vuitton did a campaign with Kusama there, which again was very dominated by polka dots, but they had this incredible series of VR dancing pumpkins that were just so playful and inviting. And she really does manipulate and play with the form to keep it interesting. And what some historians have debated is the idea that she keeps using these pumpkins and playing with them is the idea that of infinity, and that they are forever fruitful and good luck items. One of the most famous examples of Kusama's pumpkin art is her series of large-scale pumpkin sculptures. These works often displayed outdoors. And just a bit of a side note, if you're in London at the moment, there are a couple of Kusama pumpkins currently on display in Hyde Park by the Serpentine Gallery, and they're there for the summer. Also, if you're interested in Kusama, her first ever permanent artwork has been installed in London outside, I think it's Liverpool Street Station. You might have to Google that. Not pumpkins, but very beautiful polka dot balls. Anyway, I digress. Now, the pumpkins are not just merely something that repeat in her sculptures, they also appear in her paintings and her very famous and highly sought after in terms of experience installation mirror rooms known as infinity mirror rooms. And in one in particular known as Infinity Mirrored Room, All the Eternal Love That I Have for Pumpkins, which she made in 2016. Now, if you don't know what a mirrored room is, essentially it's a room, as you can imagine, and you open a door, or a door is open for you, and you step inside and the door is closed and you're given about 15 or 20 seconds and you are greeted with 4 walls that are mirrored, and in front of you are either chandeliers or pumpkins or some other motif that Kusama is interested in. And essentially they're called infinity rooms because the mirrors reflect off each other and the reflections go on and on and on and on and on. They are incredible things to step inside. And a couple of years ago, Victoria Muriel had one where I think the queue was like an hour and a half long to get into it. And currently Tate have a mirror room on display as a way of celebrating I think it was to celebrate their 20th anniversary of moving into the Tate Modern opening. But if you can still get tickets for that, I would highly recommend that you do if you've never done one. Slightly gimmicky, but just lovely things as well to take part in. And again, the idea that she dedicated a whole entire mirror room just purely to pumpkins just shows you, again, ties back into the symbolism of these being these abundant and nurturing sources of food. And I love the idea of stepping inside where she's inviting you into a room that the artist herself is wishing you abundance and nourishment in affinity. It's very, very beautiful. Now, Kusama's use of pumpkin motifs can also be interpreted through various psychological and physiological lenses. From a psychological perspective, the pumpkin may represent a form of self-therapy for the artist, helping her to cope with her mental health struggles. If you go back to what we said at the beginning of this episode, she suffered from psychosis from a very, very, very young age. And actually, if you don't know very much about Kusama, she actually lives in a psychiatric ward and has done for decades now. And I was recently speaking to another curator about her pieces, and we were talking about the work that's just been unveiled in London, and they were saying that actually there's only 2 people that are allowed in to visit her, and one of them is a curator from the Tate, because her love of routine is very, very important to her. And she's like 92, 93. She's getting on a bit. And it's this idea of routine every single day has to be the same. And injecting someone that she doesn't know into that can really interrupt her flow and her creativity. Anyway, I digress. So the pumpkins can be seen as a way of going back to her childhood and these senses of being in the country and helping her ground herself in terms of familiarity and stability. And the idea that she keeps using them as a repeat pattern and they are an organic form can be seen as manifesting her need for order and stability in a chaotic world, or rather her chaotic world, or even her chaotic mind and understanding. This interpretation also aligns with the principles of art therapy, where creating art is used as a means of expressing and managing emotions. Physiologically, Kusama's pumpkins can also be understood through the lens of existentialism, where the repetition of forms and patterns in her work reflect the idea of finding meaning in the everyday routine of life. Like I've just mentioned, with her idea of being stuck to a routine is something that's very stable for her. By transforming an ordinary vegetable into a subject of profound artistic expression, Kusama elevates a mundane item into something that's sublime, and suggesting that beauty and meaning can be found in the most simple things and places. There's also been debate amongst art historians that the pumpkin could have a feminist interpretation as well, in that as a female artist in a male-dominated art world, Kusama has faced numerous challenges and barriers throughout her career. And Kusama actually didn't become very famous until later on in her practice. And the choice of using the pumpkin, a humble and very, as you would say, unassuming vegetable, can be seen as a feminist statement challenging traditional notions of what constitutes, air quotes here, high art, and questioning the hierarchies of artistic values. So it can be seen as her rebelling against what's considered high art, the traditional forms of art, be that portraits or landscapes, and trying to put her own stamp on that. Now, the organic, rounded forms of Kusama's pumpkins also evoke a sense of femininity and fertility, connecting her work with the themes of womanhood and the female experience. I mean, if you think about a pumpkin, if you've ever cut into one, it's full of seeds. The whole point of the seeds is to fertilise and bring on next generation. So I don't think it's a very far-fetched concept and theme, this idea of sowing your seeds, be that artistically or even in the sense of fertility. And if you think about the idea of womanhood and female experience and thinking about the pumpkin as a way of doing that, it really does sit very well with previous interviews that Kusama has done, where she wholly states that her practice is all about womanhood and her identity as a woman and how being a woman impacts her artistic vision. What I think is incredible is that this humble pumpkin, if we will say, has become such an iconic symbol for Kusama, and it makes her work instantly recognisable, which I just think is incredible and not really something that a lot of artists can claim to have. They've been exhibited in major museums and galleries around the world, and her work, although simple visually, allows audiences of any level to find meaning or find it visually appealing, and it really does tear down these barriers in and around the art world and understanding, because most people have seen a pumpkin or polka dots. So there's a real sense of eradicating the elitism within art history if you think about the types of motifs that Kusama has used again and again and again. And as I said previously, Kusama has worked with multiple brands and museums, and as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, she did an incredible campaign with Louis Vuitton last year for I think it was their spring-summer collection, and all their shops and windows all over the world were just incredibly fun. And it actually made me go into the Louis Vuitton shop on Bond Street in London. I've never been in a designer shop ever, but because it was decorated and it had these Kusama robots in the window, which were unbelievable, it made me want to go in and see the collection and engage with the collection. And fun fact, if you're also in London and you find yourself on Bond Street and you pass the Louis Vuitton store, I would highly recommend that you go in, because they have an incredible art collection in the store. They have Tracy Emin's, they've got Annie Morris sculptures, they've got prints and posters of all sorts of things, and they also have a William Tyrrell sculpture. This beautiful, I'm sure it's a William Tyrrell sculpture, otherwise I'll be a terrible art historian. So I'd highly recommend that you go in just to look at the art. So what does all this mean about the pumpkin and Kusama? Well, I think it shows that her obsession with pumpkins is a testament to her unique artistic vision and how she wants to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Through her use of the pumpkin motif, Kusama has explored themes of comfort, stability, and infamy. And I really see these pumpkins as Kusama's gift to the world. Something that's inviting, and the art is wishing you infinite stability, comfort, and love. But most importantly, however, I think these remind you that beauty can be found in even the most simple places. And there you have it, another episode of Jo's Art History Podcast, Bitesize. Small, manageable podcast episodes that see me, Jo McLaughlin, your host and resident art historian, deep dive into a specific artwork or artist in 10 minutes or less. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, rate and subscribe. It helps other people find us and it means more to me than you know. And while you're doing that, why not share the podcast with someone you think might enjoy it too? If you'd like to support the future of the podcast, please consider purchasing and gifting me a book from my Amazon wishlist, which is in the show notes below. This will be used to research future episodes of the podcast, both full-length episodes and bite-sized episodes too. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do that in several ways. You can email me, joesarthistory@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram, which is @joesarthistory. Finally, I've been your host and resident art historian, Jo McLaughlin. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, keep learning and remember, art is for all. Bye.